The air in my backyard was thick and heavy, a classic Midwestern late-afternoon humidity that made even sitting still feel like a chore. It was the 4th of July, and the scent of charcoal and grilling burgers was a comforting, familiar aroma. At 52, I've hosted enough of these barbecues to have the rhythm down cold. The obligatory, awkward family photos with everyone squinting into the sun, the small talk about the oppressive heat, and the quiet undercurrent of tension that inevitably finds a way to the surface. My wife, Sarah, was an absolute pro at navigating it, her cheerful demeanor and warm smile a constant source of calm. But even she couldn't completely paper over the family's deep-seated complexities. She was a master diplomat, a quality I admired more with each passing year of our 2-decade marriage. My sister, Laura, arrived precisely 20 minutes late, as was her custom. She breezed in like a small, chaotic storm, her 2 children, my niece and nephew, in tow. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a loose, messy ponytail, and a smudge of what looked like ketchup or barbecue sauce was innocently smeared on her cheek. She embraced me with a hug that was a little too tight, a little too long, her voice full of an almost theatrical exuberance. "Mark, you made it! I wasn't sure you were going to show up," she exclaimed, as if there was ever a question. "I live less than a mile away, and our annual barbecue is a tradition I've never missed." But Laura had a knack for making every interaction feel like a grand, long-awaited reunion. "Good to see you too, Laura," I said, managing a smile that felt a little strained around the edges. I've always loved my sister, but our relationship has been a complicated tapestry of affection and frustration. Ever since our parents passed away, I've been cast in the role of the sensible, grounded older brother, the de facto head of the family. It's a role I never sought, and one she never seemed to fully grasp or appreciate. There was a quiet resentment there, a feeling that I was always holding the purse strings, making the big decisions, and she was always on the receiving end. The next few hours unfolded in a familiar, comfortable rhythm. The kids, my niece and nephew, played a frenetic game of tag on the sprawling lawn, their innocent, high-pitched laughter a sweet counterpoint to the low hum of adult conversation. Sarah moved effortlessly through the crowd, a glass of iced tea or a plate of food in hand, making sure everyone felt welcome and cared for. My brother-in-law, Greg, a quiet man with a gentle face, mostly kept to himself, nursing a beer and watching the children with a fond, distant expression. The scene was a perfect picture of American summer contentment, the kind you see on greeting cards. But I knew deep down that the picture was just that, a well-composed surface hiding a more complex reality. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in magnificent strokes of fiery orange and soft pink, the energy of the crowd began to wane. The conversations grew quieter, settling into a contented murmur as people digested their food and the day's activities. This was always my favorite part of the barbecue, the peaceful lull before the grand finale of fireworks. It was a moment of quiet reflection, a time to just be with the people you loved. It was in this quiet moment that Laura came and sat down next to me on the patio bench. She had a strange look on her face, a mixture of profound gratitude and a kind of nervous relief I couldn't quite place. She took a deep breath, her shoulders rising and falling, and I could tell she was about to say something significant. "I just wanted to thank you, Mark," she began, her voice soft but filled with a sincerity that caught me off guard. "For what?" I asked, confused. My mind raced through recent events. Had I done something special? I'd helped her with a clogged kitchen sink a few weeks ago, but that hardly seemed to warrant a public, emotionally charged thank you at a family gathering. "For the check," she said, her eyes welling up a little. She looked at me, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. "For the $15,000. It changed everything for us. I don't know how we would have gotten through this without you." My mind went completely blank. The world around me seemed to tilt on its axis. The distant laughter of the children, the gentle chatter of my relatives, the pop of a firecracker in the neighborhood. It all faded into a muffled, distant buzz. My heart started to pound a frantic, disbelieving rhythm against my ribs. I stared at her, my mouth agape, searching for words that simply wouldn't come. "The check? What check, Laura?" I finally managed to stammer out, my voice sounding foreign and thin to my own ears. She looked at me, a flicker of confusion crossing her face, as if she couldn't believe I was asking. "The one you sent, for Greg's medical bills, the one you transferred to our account a few months ago." A cold dread seeped into my bones, a horrifying certainty that something was terribly wrong. Greg's medical bills. I knew he had a heart scare a few months back. I knew they were struggling financially, living paycheck to paycheck with 2 kids. But I hadn't given them any money, not $15,000, not a single dime. That was a substantial amount, the kind of money you don't just forget you've given away. My entire financial life is meticulously tracked, every dollar accounted for. This was impossible. "Laura, I didn't send you any money," I said, my voice barely a whisper, a strange mix of disbelief and dawning fear. "I have no idea what you're talking about." The gratitude on her face instantly dissolved, replaced by a look of shock and then a slow, dawning horror. She pulled her phone out of her pocket, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through her banking app. She turned the screen to me, a screenshot of a deposit from a few months prior. The description read, "Transfer from Mark's trust account." My name, my trust account. But there was a long, unfamiliar number at the end of it, a number I didn't recognize. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, the air driven from my lungs. The name of the trust account was correct. I had set it up years ago to manage our family's small inheritance after our parents passed, but I was the only one with access to it, or so I thought. This was impossible. Someone had used my name, or someone had gained access to my account without my knowledge. Laura's face was now as pale as a sheet. She looked at me, then at the screen, then back at me, as if trying to reconcile the two impossibilities. But it came from you," she said, her voice a wavering, desperate sound. "That's what the bank told me. They said you'd made the transfer. They even confirmed your name on the account." I shook my head, my mind a frantic, chaotic scramble of thoughts. Who would do this? Why? A wave of anger, cold and righteous, washed over the initial shock. Someone had used my name, my trust account, to give my sister money without my knowledge. And now, in a cruel twist, I was the one who looked like a liar. The man who had been thanked for a gift he never gave. The fireworks started to pop and sizzle in the distance, a loud, celebratory symphony of light and color. But for me, the 4th of July barbecue was over. The only thing I could hear was the frantic beat of my own heart, and the sound of my family's trust shattering all around me. I had to get to the bottom of this, and I had a sickening feeling that the answers weren't going to be pleasant. The perfect picture of our family had just been torn to shreds, and I was holding a piece of the jagged mess. The festive atmosphere of the barbecue continued around us, a vibrant, oblivious scene of laughter, music, and light. But for Laura and me, the world had shrunk to the small, tense space between us on the patio bench. The initial shock had given way to a quiet, urgent conversation, our voices low and urgent, so as not to draw attention from the other relatives still milling about. The air, once heavy with summer humidity, now felt charged with an unspoken tension. "Are you sure, Mark? You're absolutely positive?" Laura's voice was filled with a desperate, pleading hope that I would suddenly remember some grand, benevolent gesture I had made in a moment of charitable amnesia. She wanted the easy answer, the one where I had simply forgotten. I wish I could have given it to her. "Laura, a $15,000 check isn't something you just forget about," I said, the frustration seeping into my tone despite my best efforts to keep it in check. "I didn't approve this. I didn't even know you needed that much money for Greg's bills." She flinched at my bluntness. "I didn't want to bother you. Greg lost his job and then the heart scare. The hospital bills were piling up. We were at our wits' end. It was so hard to ask for help, and then the money just appeared. It felt like a miracle." Her voice was soft, laced with a mix of shame and gratitude. It made my heart ache for her, even as my mind raced, trying to find a logical explanation. I felt a surge of sympathy for her, quickly followed by a cold, analytical dread. The money had to have come from somewhere. It was my trust account, and I was the trustee. I was the only one who could authorize transfers. My mind went through a rapid-fire checklist of every family member who might have access to my financial information, and every single one came back a blank, except, "Who else knew about Greg's situation?" I asked, the question hanging in the air between us, a small piece of a much larger, more terrifying puzzle. I mean, besides me, of course. Laura thought for a long moment, her brow furrowed in concentration. My mother-in-law, Greg's parents, of course, my friend Jessica, and, well, I think I mentioned it to Mom. I felt a pang of sadness. Mom's been gone for 3 years, Laura, I said, a little too harshly, my frustration getting the better of me. I know. I meant I told her about it before she passed, but not recently, obviously. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading for understanding. No one else in the family, just you and me and Mom, and my kids. But they don't understand any of this. They just know we were worried. I knew she was telling the truth. The only people who knew the full extent of my parents' estate and my control over it were Laura and me. I'd been the one to set up the trust, to deal with the lawyers and the mountains of paperwork after they passed. This was a private matter, a financial arrangement that no one else needed to know about. It was a sacred trust, a symbol of my responsibility to our family, and it had been compromised. We need to look into this, I said, getting up from the bench, unable to sit still any longer. I need to call the bank first thing tomorrow morning and get to the bottom of this. We need to find out who did this. Sarah, sensing the shift in mood from across the yard, walked over, her face a mask of concern. Is everything all right, you two? She asked, her voice low and gentle. She could read a room better than anyone I knew, and she knew something was deeply wrong. Laura and I exchanged a quick, silent look. Yeah, we're good, I said, forcing a smile that felt more like a grimace. Just talking about some old family stuff. Nothing to worry about. Sarah looked at me, her eyes seeing right through the thin veil of the lie. We've been married for over 20 years. She knows my tells, the way my jaw tightens when I'm stressed, the way my eyes dart away when I'm being evasive. She gave me a look that said, "We'll talk later," and went back to the crowd, her presence a silent promise of support. The rest of the evening was a blur. The fireworks were loud and spectacular, but I barely saw them. My mind was in a different place, replaying the conversation, sifting through the pieces of this unsettling puzzle. How could someone have accessed my trust account, and why? It wasn't just the $15,000, it was the breach of trust, the violation of my privacy, the lie I was now inadvertently complicit in. I was the rock of our family, the one everyone came to for stability, for answers. This kind of deceit wasn't just a financial matter, it was a personal one. It felt like a betrayal from within, a poison seeping into the foundation of everything I thought I knew about my family and our shared life. After the last sparkler had fizzled out and the guests started to leave, I walked my sister and her family to their car. Greg, bless his heart, thanked me again for the help. I just nodded, a grim smile on my face. I couldn't bring myself to correct him, not in front of the kids, not in the middle of the street. This was a conversation for another time, a private one. The truth, no matter how painful, had to come out, but not here, not now. When everyone was gone, and the house was finally quiet, the silence a stark contrast to the earlier celebration, Sarah came to me in the living room. She sat on the couch, patting the cushion next to her. "Okay, what's going on, Mark?" she asked, her voice calm but firm, a quiet demand for the truth. "You look like you've just seen a ghost." I took a deep breath and told her everything. The conversation with Laura, the check, the trust account. I saw the same look of confusion and disbelief on her face that had been on mine. "But that's impossible," she said. "You're the only one with the login for that account. You never gave me the password. You're so careful about this stuff." "I know," I said, running a hand through my hair. Unless someone got my password. But how? I'm so meticulous. I've never written it down, never saved it on a browser. It's in my head." We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of the unknown heavy in the air. The trust account was the most sensitive of all my financial accounts. It held the small inheritance from our parents, the money I was supposed to be stewarding for our family's future. It wasn't a huge sum, but it was significant. It was a symbol of my responsibility, and now it had been compromised. I had to get to the bottom of this. It wasn't just about the money. It was about principle, about the lie that was told in my name. The thought of confronting my sister and telling her that the gift she was so grateful for wasn't from me filled me with a deep sense of dread. But I couldn't let this go. The truth, no matter how painful, had to come out. The next morning, the bright, celebratory haze of the 4th of July had lifted, replaced by a grey, oppressive humidity that matched my mood perfectly. The house was quiet, the lingering smell of grilled food and burnt fireworks, a faint reminder of the previous night's chaos. I sat at my home office desk, the phone pressed against my ear, a cup of lukewarm coffee forgotten on the coaster beside me. My mind was a whirlwind of questions and scenarios, each more unsettling than the last. "Mr. Davies, I understand your concern," the bank representative said, her voice a soothing, corporate monotone that did nothing to calm my fraying nerves. "But our records show that the transfer was authorized using the correct credentials for your account. It was a one-time transaction to a verified recipient, and it went through without any red flags or security alerts." "Authorized by who?" I asked, my voice tight with a frustration I was trying hard to keep in check. The polite, professional detachment of the woman on the other end of the line was maddening. "The authorization came from your unique account login," she repeated patiently, as if explaining a simple concept to a child. "The transaction was initiated from a device that has been associated with your account in the past." "A device associated with my account?" My stomach dropped. I only used my home computer for these transactions. I didn't use my phone, I didn't use a tablet. My security protocol for financial matters was borderline obsessive. The representative was maddeningly polite and completely unhelpful. She kept telling me that the transaction was legitimate from their end, that there was nothing they could do without more information from my end. They couldn't even tell me who the transfer was for, citing privacy laws. I had to tell them. "The recipient was my sister, Laura Davies," I said, my voice heavy with a grim certainty. "And I didn't authorize it. I can prove it. I was with my wife hosting a barbecue and didn't even touch my computer." A moment of silence on the other end of the line. "Thank you for providing that information, Mr. Davies. We will make a note of this. If you believe your account has been compromised, we can initiate a formal investigation, but it will take time. In the meantime, we would recommend changing your password and enabling two-factor authentication for your account." The call ended with her offering the standard security advice, as if that would somehow solve the mystery of who had accessed my account. I hung up the phone, my head spinning. The bank was a dead end. They were sticking to their protocol, their digital paper trail. The transfer was authorized, the credentials were correct, and the device was familiar. It all pointed to one terrifying conclusion. Someone I knew had gained access to my account. I started sifting through my computer's files, looking for anything out of the ordinary. A history of recent logins, unusual downloads, anything that might point to a security breach. Nothing. My computer seemed clean. I ran a virus scan and a malware check just to be sure. The results came back negative, just as I had expected. This wasn't a random hack. This was personal. Sarah came in, a fresh cup of coffee in her hands. She sat on the edge of the desk, watching me with a worried expression. "Any luck?" I shook my head. "They're no help. The bank says the transaction was legitimate. The login was from my computer, apparently." "Your computer?" Her eyebrows shot up in surprise. "But that's impossible. You were here the whole time. You didn't log in and do a transfer, did you? You're absolutely sure?" "Of course I'm sure, Sarah. I'd remember giving away $15,000. I snapped, the stress and frustration finally getting to me. The moment the words were out, I regretted them. I ran a hand over my face. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to snap. It's just, this is insane. Someone used my account from my computer to give my sister money. It makes no sense." "Unless it wasn't an online transfer," Sarah said, her voice quiet, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Did you ever write a physical check from that account? Maybe for a bill or something?" I thought for a moment. "No, that's a trust account. All the transfers are electronic, or I go to the bank in person. I never use checks for it. It's a security measure." We were back to square one. A ghost had stolen my login, used my computer, and transferred money to my sister. The explanation was just too fantastic to be real. This wasn't a random act of fraud. This was a deliberate, calculated move. I decided to call my sister again. I needed to know every single detail about the transaction. The bank couldn't help, but maybe the recipient's bank statement had more information, a clue I was missing. I called Laura. She picked up on the first ring, her voice a little shaky. "Mark, what did the bank say? Did they find anything?" "The bank says the transaction was legitimate," I said without preamble. "They say it came from my computer, using my login. We have a problem, Laura, a big one. This wasn't a mistake. Someone deliberately did this." "Oh my God," she whispered, the sound a mix of shock and fear. "But who would do that?" "I don't know. I need you to do something for me. Can you send me the full transaction details? The date, the time, everything. From your bank statement. I need to see if there's a note or anything attached to the transfer." She sent me a text message a few minutes later with a screenshot of her bank statement. The transaction was listed with a date and a time. It also had a note, a single cryptic note, "For a fresh start." The note hit me like a physical blow. For a fresh start. My mind immediately went back in time. It was a phrase my mother used to say. Whenever one of us was going through a rough patch, she would say, "Don't worry. A new day brings a fresh start." It was a small personal thing, a detail no one outside our immediate family would know. My mother. My mind reeled. It couldn't be. She was gone. But the note. The note was so specific, so personal. It was a clue that pointed to someone who knew our family intimately. This wasn't a random hacker or a disgruntled employee. It was someone who had access to our history, to our shared language of affection and support. I looked at Sarah, the phone still in my hand. "The note on the transfer," I said, my voice a hollow whisper. "It says, 'For a fresh start.'" Mum's phrase. She used to say it to us all the time. Sarah's eyes widened in recognition. She put a hand to her mouth, a silent, terrible understanding dawning on her face. "But who would know that? Besides you and Laura?" The question hung in the air, a silent, terrible accusation. Who? The number of people who could have done this had just shrunk dramatically. The list now consisted of me, Laura, and a ghost from the past. The ghost I was supposed to be in charge of. The ghost who, it seemed, was still reaching out from beyond the grave, pulling the strings of our lives. The feeling of dread that had been a low hum since last night now roared to life. This wasn't just a financial mystery anymore. It was personal. It was a lie, told in my name, with a hidden message that only my sister and I could understand. I felt a cold knot of fear in my stomach. Was there something I had missed in my parents' will? Something I didn't know about? This was no longer just a simple case of fraud. It was something far more sinister and closer to home. The cold trail had just gotten a lot hotter, and it was leading me straight to the people I loved most. The note, "For a fresh start," played on a loop in my head like a broken record. It was more than a clue. It was a taunt, a message from someone who knew us, who knew our family's private language. I couldn't shake the image of my mother saying it, her hand on my shoulder, her voice full of quiet reassurance. The familiarity of it felt like a profound violation, a sacred memory used for a deceptive purpose. I was no longer just looking for a thief. I was looking for a ghost. I decided to go to the bank in person. The phone calls had been useless, a bureaucratic wall of corporate policy and unhelpful platitudes. I needed to look someone in the eye, to demand answers that a phone script couldn't provide. I needed to see the person who was responsible for my bank's inability to see what was so obviously wrong with this transaction. The bank manager, a well-dressed woman with a forced, practiced smile, sat across from me in a small, sterile office that smelled faintly of lemon-scented cleaning products. I explained the situation again, showing her the transaction screenshot, pointing to the note. She listened patiently, her expression unreadable, her eyes a calm, professional blue that revealed nothing. "Mr. Davies, I understand your concern, but the transaction was authenticated," she said, her voice even and detached. "Our system logged an IP address that we have on file as yours. The login credentials were correct. We cannot release any further information. The transaction is closed from our end." "But the note," I insisted, leaning forward in my chair. the frustration boiling over. The note is a personal phrase from my deceased mother. No one else would know it. It's a message, not just a transaction. She looked at the screen, her brow furrowed slightly, a flicker of something that might have been curiosity crossing her face. The note is just a text field, Mr. Davies. It can be written by anyone who initiates the transaction. It doesn't change the fact that the transaction was authorized with your personal credentials. I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated frustration. She was treating this like a simple case of a compromised password, a common occurrence. But it wasn't. It was targeted. It was a message, not just a transaction. The precision of it, the personal touch, felt calculated, cruel. "What about the IP address?" I asked, my mind racing, trying to find a new angle. "Can you tell me where it came from?" Not a street address, of course, just... Was it from a cell phone? A public network? Something specific? She hesitated, looking at her computer screen again, her fingers tapping on the keyboard. She was either checking or trying to decide if she was allowed to tell me. Her silence was a long, excruciating moment. Finally, she looked up. "I can confirm that the transaction was initiated from a mobile device, a phone. We have the device ID on file, but we cannot release that information." A phone, not my home computer. The bank representative I spoke to yesterday had been wrong, or she had lied, or she had simply looked at the last known login, which was my computer, and made a lazy assumption. A phone. That opened up a whole new set of possibilities. It meant it wasn't a remote hack of my home system. It was something physical, something closer to home. I left the bank feeling more frustrated than ever, but with one crucial new piece of information: a phone. Who in my family would have access to my login information and my phone? My wife, Sarah, was the obvious initial suspect, but I knew in my heart that she would never do this. She was as baffled and concerned as I was. We were a team. We didn't keep secrets like this from each other. That left me with my sister, Laura. She was the only other person who knew about the trust account, the only other person who knew the phrase. But why would she give herself money from my account and then pretend it was a surprise? It didn't make sense. It was too complicated, too convoluted, too emotionally manipulative to be her style. She was a simple, straightforward person, for better or worse. As I drove home, I considered another possibility, a dark, uncomfortable thought that I had been trying to push away. What if it wasn't about the money at all? What if the $15,000 was just a pretext, a way to deliver a message? But what message? And from whom? My brother-in-law, Greg, came to mind. He was a quiet man, a little withdrawn, but I couldn't imagine him doing something so elaborate and deceptive. He was a simple, hard-working carpenter who had been laid off. He wouldn't have the technical expertise or the motive to orchestrate something like this. He would have just asked for the money. He wasn't a schemer. I decided to take a different approach. Instead of trying to find the culprit, I would try to understand the motive. Why $15,000 and why now? The number felt significant. It wasn't a random amount. I remembered our parents' will. They had left everything to me to manage, but they had also included a small clause that I had never paid much attention to. It was a small sum set aside for emergencies for either Laura or me. The amount was $15,000. My heart began to pound again, a slow, heavy thudding in my chest. The amount wasn't a coincidence. It was deliberate. It was the exact amount our parents had set aside for an emergency, but that money was supposed to be in a separate, small account. I had moved it into the main trust account to make it easier to manage years ago. I had completely forgotten about the specific clause, about the specific amount. The pieces started to fit together in a way that was both horrifying and illuminating. Someone knew about the emergency fund. Someone knew that Laura was in a financial bind. Someone had taken the money from the trust account and sent it to her, complete with a personal message from our mother. But who? The list of suspects was short. Me, Laura, Greg, and our parents, the ghost in the machine. I thought back to the will, to the lawyer who had handled the paperwork. His name was Mr. Harrison. He was an old family friend, a man my parents had trusted implicitly. He had handled all their financial affairs for years. He knew everything. He knew about the will, about the trust account, about the emergency fund. Could he have done it? It seemed unthinkable. Mr. Harrison was a man of impeccable integrity, but who else had all the pieces? I pulled out my phone and found his number. It was time to make a very uncomfortable phone call. I knew the conversation was going to be difficult, but I had to know the truth. This was no longer just about the money. It was about my family, about the secrets we kept, and about the ghost of our past that was still pulling the strings. The truth was out there, and it was waiting for me. I just had to find it. The phone call to Mr. Harrison was difficult, to say the least. His voice, usually so calm and measured, was filled with a mix of surprise and confusion when he heard my name. He was a man of the old guard, a man who still used a landline and a daily planner. He was retired now, enjoying his golden years in a quiet suburban home, far from the legal intricacies and family dramas he used to manage. He hadn't been involved in our family's affairs for years, not since my father's passing. "Mark, what a surprise. It's been a long time," he said, his voice a little raspy, as if he were trying to recall a distant memory. "Mr. Harrison, I'm sorry to bother you, but I have a question about my parents' will. The trust account. I'm hoping you can help me with a detail I can't seem to remember." "Oh yes, the trust," he said, a note of fondness in his voice. "A testament to your father's foresight. He was a good man, Mark, a very good man. He worried about his family, a lot." I swallowed hard, the words catching in my throat. "I know. Sir, do you remember a specific clause in the will? About a $15,000 emergency fund for me and my sister?" A long moment of silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear him sifting through old memories, old files stored in his mind. "Yes, I do," he said, his voice now more serious, more focused. "It was a small fund, separate from the main inheritance. Your mother insisted on it. She said it was for a rainy day, for an emergency. She was always worrying about you two. She didn't want you to have to ask for a handout if things got difficult. Did you know that money was transferred to my sister, Laura, a few months ago?" I asked, my voice low and a little shaky. He was quiet again, a longer silence this time. "No, I didn't. That would have been your responsibility as the trustee. I was just the executor of the will. Once the trust was set up, it was out of my hands. I'm surprised you didn't do it yourself, or at least approve it. The transfer came from my account. But I didn't do it," I said, the words feeling heavy and hollow as I spoke them, as if they were a lie, even though they were the truth. "And the note on the transfer was my mother's phrase, for a fresh start." Mr. Harrison's voice was full of genuine shock. That's impossible, Mark. The only people with access to that account were you and, well, your parents, of course. But they've been gone for years. Are you sure you're not mistaken?" I felt a chill run down my spine. Was there anything in the will that I didn't know about, Mr. Harrison? A secret clause, a hidden instruction, something that would have allowed this to happen? He scoffed, a dry, rustling sound over the phone line. "No, Mark. Your parents were meticulous. They didn't keep secrets, at least not in their financial affairs. Everything was above board. You were given control of the trust because your father trusted you implicitly. He knew you would take care of your sister. He told me so many times. He was so proud of you for taking on that role." I hung up the phone, no closer to the truth than I was before. Mr. Harrison had been no help, but he had confirmed two things: the existence of the emergency fund and the fact that my parents were not the type of people to hide things. The trail was still cold, the mystery still unsolved. Sarah was sitting in the living room, a thoughtful expression on her face. I walked in and told her about the conversation. She listened patiently, her fingers drumming a slow, pensive rhythm on the armrest of the couch. "What if it's not an online thing?" she said when I was done. "What if it's an old-fashioned lie? What if the whole premise of this is wrong?" "A lie? Think about it, Mark. What if the money didn't come from you at all? What if Laura is mistaken? Or what if she's lying? What if she's just trying to find a reason to not feel like a charity case?" The idea hit me like a ton of bricks. It was a possibility I had been trying to ignore, a dark, ugly thought. My sister, the one I had taken care of for years, the one I loved, was she capable of this? I didn't want to believe it. But the evidence was piling up. The note, the amount, the timing. It was too perfect. I walked over to the desk and pulled out a box of old photos. We were cleaning out our parents' house a few years ago, and I had taken a box of old pictures to sort through. I hadn't opened it since. I wanted to see if there was a clue, a face, something that would make sense of this madness. I flipped through old photos of my parents, of Laura and me as kids. I saw pictures of family vacations, of birthdays, of holidays, and then I found a picture of my father, a few months before he passed. He was sitting at his desk, and in the background, a small whiteboard was visible. My mother had a habit of writing little notes to him on it. I zoomed in on the photo with my phone. The note was almost illegible, but I could just make out a few words. It was a list of things to do. And at the bottom, in my mother's familiar cursive, a small note to my father. Don't forget the money. For Laura. A fresh start. My blood ran cold. The note wasn't a phrase. It was an instruction. My mother knew about Laura's financial troubles even before they became public. She had instructed my father to give Laura the money, but he had passed away before he could do it. The pieces finally clicked into place. My mother, she had been the one to set this up, but how? She was gone. I sat there, the photo in my hands, a silent testament to a secret I never knew. My parents, the people I had thought were so open and honest, had been keeping a secret from me. A secret that was now bubbling to the surface, a message from the grave that was turning my world upside down. I had to talk to Laura. I had to tell her what I had found. The ghost in the machine wasn't a hacker. It was a parent's love, reaching out from beyond the grave to take care of her child. The trail was no longer cold. It was a hot, emotional mess, and I was about to walk right into the middle of it. I called Laura and told her I was coming over. My voice must have betrayed the urgency I felt, a mix of grim determination and something close to awe. She didn't argue. She just said, "Okay, Mark, I'll be here." The quiet resignation in her voice told me that she too was searching for answers, and she knew I might have found them. The drive to her house was a silent, contemplative one. The city streets, usually a familiar jumble of cars and people, now seemed strange and alien, as if I were seeing them for the first time. I felt a sense of dread mixed with a grim determination. I was about to uncover a secret that had been buried for years, a secret that had been kept from me by the people I trusted most. The truth felt both terrifying and necessary. Laura opened the door, her face pale and drawn, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She led me to the living room, and we sat on the couch, the same one I remembered from my parents' house. They had given it to her when they moved into a smaller home a few years ago. The faint smell of their old house, a mix of old books and lemon polish, still clung to the fabric. "What's going on, Mark?" she asked, her voice a fragile whisper. "Did you find something? The way you sounded on the phone—" I didn't answer right away. I pulled out the old photo and handed it to her. She took it, her hand trembling slightly, her eyes scanning the familiar faces of our parents and our younger selves. Then she saw the whiteboard, the note. Her hand went to her mouth, a silent gasp of recognition. "Mom," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't understand. What does this mean?" "It means she knew," I said, my voice thick with emotion, a newfound understanding of my mother's quiet wisdom. "She knew you would need help. She knew about the medical bills, about Greg's job. She was trying to help you, even after she was gone. She was the one who was truly looking out for you." Laura started to sob, a deep wrenching sound that came from a place of long-held pain and relief. But as how? How did she do this? She's not here. How could she have sent me money? I explained what I had pieced together, the emergency fund, the note, the fact that the transfer came from a phone. The only person I could think of who would have access to my login information and my parents' secrets was our father, I said, the words catching in my throat. "I think Dad set this up. He must have known he was sick too. He must have given his login information to someone who he trusted implicitly to help you, someone who would execute his final wishes." Laura looked at me, her eyes wide with disbelief. Who would that be? You were the only one he trusted with the money. That's what he told me. I had a terrible thought, a suspicion so outlandish that I almost dismissed it. But it was the only thing that made sense. I got up from the couch and started to pace, the restlessness of my mind manifesting in my body. What if he didn't give his login to anyone? I said, more to myself than to her, the puzzle pieces clicking into place. What if he just gave them the instructions? A single-use transfer code, a kind of digital key. Instructions, what are you talking about? Mark, that sounds crazy. Is it? I countered, stopping my pacing to look at her. Our dad was an engineer. He loved gadgets. He was always on his phone, always experimenting with new technology. What if he set up a time-delayed transfer, something that would only be activated in an emergency, something that would send the money to you when you needed it most? She shook her head, her face a mask of confusion. A digital will? Mark, that's insane. This is something out of a movie. Is it? I asked again. Think about it. The login came from a phone that had a one-time login. A phone that wasn't my computer. It was a very specific, very personal thing. What if he left a set of instructions? A kind of digital will, something that would only be activated if he wasn't around and you were in a crisis. The note from Mom was the trigger, the sign that it was a real emergency. We sat in silence for a long time, the weight of my words hanging in the air. The idea was outlandish, but it was the only thing that explained everything. The mysterious transfer, the personal note, the source of the money. It all pointed to a single, impossible conclusion. Finally, Laura spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper, filled with a mix of awe and anger. But why didn't he just give me the money before he died? Why all the secrecy? Why do it this way? It just feels so impersonal, like he didn't trust me enough to handle it myself. I don't know, I said. A wave of sadness washing over me as I thought of the man I had always seen as so practical and straightforward. Maybe he was trying to protect you. Maybe he didn't want you to feel like a burden. Or maybe he wanted to make sure the money was there for a real emergency and not for something trivial. He knew you were impulsive. He wanted to make sure you had a safety net, but only when you truly needed it. He didn't trust me to manage my own money, she said, her voice rising in anger and hurt. The truth was out, but it was a messy, complicated truth, and her pain was raw. No, Laura. It's not that, I said, sitting back down next to her and taking her hand. He was trying to protect you. He loved you. He wanted to make sure you were taken care of no matter what. He just did it in a way that he thought was best. It was his way of providing for you, even after he was gone. I put an arm around her, and she leaned into me, her body shaking with sobs. The truth was out, but it was a messy, complicated truth. It was a truth that was born out of love, but it had caused so much confusion and pain. The ghost in the machine was our father, a man who had loved his children so much that he had set up a contingency plan for them from beyond the grave. The burden of the secret, the years of believing that I was the one who had been wronged, had finally lifted. But in its place was a different kind of pain. The pain of realizing that my parents, the people I had always thought of as open and honest, had been keeping a secret from me. A secret that had been revealed in the most unexpected way, at the most unexpected time. The barbecue was just the setting. The real story was the one that had been unfolding in the background for years. A story of love, of sacrifice, and of a parent's undying devotion. I had come here to confront my sister, to demand answers, but I had found something else. I had found a piece of my parents that I never knew existed, a piece that was still reaching out, still trying to take care of us. And in that moment, I realized that I wasn't angry anymore. I was just sad. Sad for the lie, sad for the misunderstanding, and sad for the fact that a parent's love could be so powerful, so enduring, that it could transcend death itself. After our emotional conversation, which had been a gut-wrenching torrent of tears and confessions, Laura and I decided to go through our parents' old things. We found a few boxes in my attic that we had never bothered to open. They were dusty and smelled of mothballs and time, filled with the artifacts of a life lived and now gone. Old photo albums, journals, and a small, unassuming box labeled Dad's Stuff. We brought them down to the living room and sat on the floor, surrounded by the ghosts of our past. We started with the journals. My mother's handwriting was neat and precise, filled with daily anecdotes and observations about our lives, about the weather, about her quiet anxieties and simple joys. My father's was a mess of hurried scribbles, filled with technical notes and diagrams, the musings of a man whose mind was always in motion. It was in one of his old notebooks, a worn leather-bound journal tucked away in the back of the box, that we found it. A small sealed envelope with my name on it, the ink a faded blue. My hands trembled as I opened it, the paper crackling with age. Inside was a handwritten letter, my father's familiar script filling the page, a final, tangible piece of him I had never known existed. My dearest Mark, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you. I am sorry for the secrecy, my son. It was not my intention to deceive you, but I had to do this. I needed to ensure that your sister was taken care of. I know you will be a good trustee, and I know how much you value principle and doing things by the book, but I also know how much you worry. And in this case, principle must take a back seat to love. The money you found in your trust account, the $15,000, was the emergency fund. I set it up years ago with the help of a special program I wrote. It was a time-delayed transfer, one that would only be activated if your sister was in an emergency, and I was not here to help her. I gave a special code to a close friend, a fellow engineer I trusted implicitly. He entered it on my behalf, and the transfer was set in motion when a series of conditions I programmed were met. It was a one-time transaction, a digital contingency plan for my little girl. I knew you would be angry. I knew you would feel betrayed. I am a pragmatic man, and I knew how you would react to this. But I couldn't bear the thought of Laura needing help and not getting it. You, my son, have always been so strong, so capable. You would always find a way to get through anything. But Laura is a bit more fragile. She needs a helping hand sometimes, and I wanted to be that hand even in death. The note, "For a fresh start," was our mother's idea. She was always the poet of our family. She wanted to make sure you knew it was from us. She wanted you to know that she was with you, even in death. She loved you both more than anything in the world, and she wanted you to have a chance to get through this difficult time without the added burden of family conflict. I know you will be angry with me for this. It was a difficult decision, but please try to understand. My final act was an act of love. Please don't let this come between you and your sister. It was my secret to keep. Now it is yours to forgive. With all my love, Dad. I finished the letter, my vision blurred with tears, the words a final, profound testament to the man I'd always known but never fully understood. The final piece of the puzzle had been revealed. It wasn't a hacker. It wasn't a thief. It was a parent's love, a love so powerful that it had found a way to transcend death itself. My father, the practical, logical engineer, had used his skills to protect his family. He had made a plan, a final act of love and care, and he had trusted me to understand. I handed the letter to Laura. She read it, her face a mix of emotions, sadness, grief, and a sense of profound awe at the lengths our parents had gone to for us. She looked at me, tears streaming down her face. He did this for me, she whispered, her voice a mix of disbelief and overwhelming emotion. He thought of this? He went to all that trouble? I nodded, unable to speak. I had spent days being angry, feeling betrayed, feeling like a fool. But in that moment, all of that anger dissolved. It was replaced by a sense of profound sadness and an immense love for my parents. They had done this for us. They had made sure we would be okay even after they were gone. I'm sorry, Mark, Laura said, her voice a little choked up. I should have told you. I should have asked you for help. I was so ashamed. I didn't want you to know how much we were struggling. I didn't want to be a burden. I put my arm around her and hugged her. It's okay, Laura, it's okay. We're in this together. We always have been. We always will be. In that moment, all the tension, all the anger, all the hurt just melted away. The years of resentment, of feeling like I was the only one in charge, disappeared. The lie that had caused so much pain had turned out to be the greatest act of love I had ever known. We spent the rest of the day going through the old boxes, laughing and crying and remembering our parents. We found old photos of them, and we saw a different side of them. The parents who were so strong, so practical, had also been filled with a deep, abiding love for their children. I now understood why my father had done what he did. He hadn't wanted to burden me with his decisions, but he also hadn't wanted to leave his daughter in the lurch. He had found a way to do both, a way that was uniquely him, a way that was a final, loving gift. The barbecue had been a turning point, a moment of confrontation that had led to a revelation. The gift wasn't from me. It was from our parents, a last act of love, a final blessing. And in the end, it was a gift that was far more valuable than money. It was a gift of understanding, of forgiveness, and of a love that transcends even death itself. The days that followed were a blur of emotion. The initial shock gave way to a quiet, profound grief for the parents we had lost, and a newfound respect for the people they had been. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the love they had shown, a love so deep and so lasting that it had found a way to reach out from beyond the grave. The mystery was no longer a burden. It was a revelation. I called Sarah and told her everything. She listened patiently, her voice full of sympathy and understanding. She knew how much this meant to me, how much it had been weighing on me, how the betrayal had felt like a physical wound. She told me to take my time, to let it all sink in. She knew that this wasn't just about the trust fund, it was about the family we had lost, the secrets we had uncovered, and the bond that was now stronger than ever between Laura and me. She was my rock, the one person I could always count on to be there for me. I also called the bank manager and explained the situation. She was, as expected, a little skeptical, but I told her about the letter, about the technical details my father had outlined, about the one-time, time-delayed transfer. She listened carefully, and in the end she agreed to close the case. The mystery was solved, the case was closed, but the emotional fallout was just beginning. The resolution of the financial matter was just the first step in a long process of emotional healing. Laura and I spent the next few weeks talking, really talking for the first time in years. We talked about our parents, about our lives, about the secrets we had kept from each other. She told me about her struggles, about the fear and shame she had felt, the embarrassment of having to ask for help. I told her about the pressure I had felt, the weight of being the responsible one, the man who was supposed to have all the answers. We both realized that we had been keeping secrets, but for different reasons, all of them born out of a desire to protect ourselves and each other. The truth had brought us closer. It had broken down the walls we had built up over the years. We were no longer just siblings, we were friends again. We were allies. The years of quiet resentment and unspoken frustration were finally gone, replaced by a deep and abiding understanding. One afternoon I went over to her house to help her with some chores. Greg was there, looking tired but a little better. He had found a new job, and the pressure on him had eased considerably. He thanked me again, and this time I didn't flinch. I just smiled. "Don't thank me, Greg," I said. "It was from your in-laws. They loved you both very much. They just wanted to make sure you had a little help when you needed it." He looked confused for a moment, and then a slow understanding dawned on his face. He nodded, a single tear running down his cheek. He didn't ask any more questions. He just gave me a hug, a silent gesture of gratitude and respect. The kids were playing in the backyard, their laughter a sweet, innocent sound. Laura and I watched them, a comfortable silence between us. The tension that had been a part of our lives for so long was gone. It had been replaced by a quiet peace, a sense of rightness that I had been craving for years. I looked at my sister, at the lines of worry on her face, the way she held her hands clasped together. She had been through so much, and yet she had come through it, stronger than ever. The gift from our parents had not only helped her financially, it had helped her emotionally. It had given her a fresh start, just as the note had promised. It had given us both a fresh start. The barbecue had been a turning point, a moment of confrontation that had led to a revelation. The gift wasn't from me, it was from our parents, a last act of love, a final blessing. And in the end, it was a gift that was far more valuable than money. It was a gift of understanding, of forgiveness, and of a love that transcends even death itself. The lie that had caused so much pain had turned out to be the greatest act of love I had ever known. And in the end, it had brought us all closer together, not as a fractured family, but as a whole, loving and imperfect one. The secrets were gone. The truth was out. And we were finally ready to start over. Life began to settle into a new, more comfortable rhythm. The old wounds had started to heal, and the new bond between Laura and me was a quiet, steady presence, a constant source of comfort and support. We talked almost every day now, about everything and nothing. The distance between us, both physical and emotional, had been replaced by a sense of closeness and familiarity that I had missed more than I ever realized. We were a team again, a true team. I also started spending more time with my wife, Sarah. The mystery of the check had put an unspoken strain on our relationship, a silent weight that we had both carried. But now that the truth was out, we were able to reconnect on a deeper level. We took long walks, had quiet dinners, and talked about our future. We were a team again, and I was so grateful for her patience and her unwavering support. She had stood by me when I was at my most confused and angry, and for that, I would be eternally grateful. One evening I was sitting in my living room, the quiet of the house a welcome relief. I was thinking about the past few months. The Independence Day barbecue felt like a lifetime ago, a distant memory of a very different time. The anger, the confusion, the fear, it all felt so distant now. It was a memory, a turning point in our lives, but it no longer held any power over me. It was just a story, a part of our family's history. I looked at the old photo of my parents that I had framed and placed on my desk. They were smiling, their faces full of a quiet happiness. I understood them now, in a way I never had before. They had been keeping a secret, but it was a secret born out of love. They had been trying to protect us, to make sure we were okay even after they were gone. They had done what they thought was best for their children, and who could argue with that? I felt a sense of profound peace settle over me. The old resentments, the old feelings of betrayal had all dissolved. In their place was a profound sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the love my parents had shown, gratitude for the family I had, and gratitude for the second chance we had all been given. The anger had been a poison, and the truth had been the antidote. I realized that our story was not about a mysterious check. It was about a family, flawed and imperfect, coming together in the face of a great challenge. It was about love and forgiveness and the power of a single act of kindness to change everything. It was about seeing the truth, not just the surface-level facts, but the emotional truth that lay beneath. The fireworks were a distant memory, a fleeting moment of light and sound. The real fireworks were the ones that had been set off in my own heart, the ones that had revealed the truth, the ones that had brought us all back together. They were the silent, explosive moments of understanding and forgiveness. I knew that our lives would never be the same, but in a way, that was a good thing. We had been living a lie of resentment and misunderstanding. Now, we were living in the truth. And the truth, messy as it was beautiful. It had brought us closer than we had ever been before. It had given us a foundation built on honesty and love, not on secrets and assumptions. I looked at my wife, at my sister, at my brother-in-law, and at my niece and nephew. We were a family and we were whole. We had been given a gift of love and a fresh start, and we were going to make the most of it. A year had passed since the 4th of July barbecue that had changed everything. The sun was hot and bright again, and the smell of charcoal hung in the air, a familiar and comforting scent. The annual tradition was back, and this time the atmosphere was different. It was lighter, more genuine. The simmering tension that had always been a part of our family gatherings was gone, replaced by an easy, comfortable intimacy. We were no longer just a collection of individuals who happened to be related. We were a family, in the truest sense of the word. Laura and I stood by the grill flipping burgers. She was telling me a funny story about her kids, her face animated and full of life. I laughed, a genuine, heartfelt laugh that came from a place of pure joy. It felt so good to be a part of her life again, to be her friend as well as her brother. The years of quiet resentment and distance felt like a bad dream. The barbecue was in full swing. The kids were running around, their laughter a joyful symphony. Greg was sitting on a patio chair talking to Sarah. They were both smiling, their conversation easy and relaxed. The weight of the past year had lifted, and in its place was a sense of peace and contentment that was palpable. The struggles had not vanished, but the emotional burden of them had been lifted. I looked at my sister, at the woman who had been a source of so much confusion and anger. Now, she was just my sister, a woman I loved and respected. The check, the secret, the betrayal. It all seemed so small now. It was a part of our history, but it no longer defined us. It was a catalyst, a moment that had forced us to confront the truth, and in doing so had set us free. The real gift wasn't the money. It was the truth. The truth had set us free, free from the lies, free from the misunderstandings, free from the years of unspoken resentment. It had taught me a lesson about love, about forgiveness, and about the power of a single act of kindness to change everything. It had taught me to look beyond the surface, to seek out the emotional truth that lies beneath. As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow over the backyard, I thought about my parents. I felt a sense of profound gratitude. They had done this for us. They had given us a fresh start, not just with money, but with a deeper understanding of who we were and who they were. Their last act had been a final, loving gift. The fireworks started to pop and sizzle in the distance, a loud, celebratory symphony. But for me, the most beautiful sound was the sound of my family, laughing and talking and sharing a moment of peace and happiness. It was the sound of a family finally whole. The story wasn't about a mysterious check. It was about a family, flawed and imperfect, coming together in the face of a great challenge. It was about love and forgiveness and the power of a single act of kindness to change everything. I put my arm around my sister, and she leaned into me. "Thank you, Mark," she whispered, her voice full of a new kind of gratitude, a gratitude for a brother who had seen the truth. "For what, Laura?" I asked, a quiet smile on my face. She looked at me, her eyes glistening. "For everything. For not being angry. For helping me understand. For being my brother." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. The words were unspoken, but the feeling was there, a deep, abiding sense of connection. We were a family again, and we were whole. The gift was not just the money. It was the love that had been there all along, just waiting to be discovered. It was a gift that was far more valuable than anything money could buy.